Welcome to the Steel Curtain Podcast. It's Tuesday, October 28th, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are 4-3 after being outscored by Green Bay 28-9 in the second half on Sunday night. I'm Josh Yourish, and today I'm going to be divvying up the blame for the defensive collapse in the second half, begging the Steelers not to pour more resources into this roster, and assessing Rodgers' play with our weekly Rodgers Report. But first, let's break down that defensive disaster, because that's the only thing you can call what the Steelers did on that side of the ball on Sunday night. I think maybe the most damning evidence of how poorly coached this unit is was the Packers 2-point conversion to Romeo Doubs in the early fourth quarter, I believe it was. So not only did the Steelers miscommunicate and have both Joey Porter Jr. and Jalen Ramsey take Christian Watson coming out of this stack, this bunch formation that the Packers had that gave the Steelers tons of problems in man coverage, any types of bunch, stacks, motion at the snap. The Steelers cannot communicate. They cannot pass that stuff off. And I mentioned in the instant reaction show that those communication issues, I'm tired of hearing it as an excuse on the players. It is on the players, but it's also on the coaching staff for the scheme they're running, for the situations they're putting their personnel in. More of my issues are with the coaching staff, and I think a perfect example of that is Joey Porter Jr. and Ramsey fail to play this the right way. They fail to pass it off or even determine who's going to take who out of this bunch. And then Doubs into the flat, wide open 2-point conversion, little quick outbreaker from the bunch. You look at the play on further inspection, the Steelers had 10 defenders on the field for a critical 2-point conversion in a game you have to have on Sunday Night Football. They had 10 defenders on the field. It's an inexcusably poorly coached team. That alone, this game alone is a fireable offense for almost any head coach in the NFL, especially a defensive-minded one. It was brutal. Like, you see the communication issues and the lack of ability in man coverage on that one play. But it all comes down to the coaching staff. You know, the communication stuff, that's coaching. It's players, but it's coaching. And 10 players on the field, that's coaching. That's ridiculously unacceptable. The effort by the Steelers secondary, tackling and in run fits and anything down the field, inexcusably bad. The Steelers on the Tucker Kraft little flat route that was a long catch and run, not the RPO kind of arrow route where he scored the touchdown, but on the one when he had a really long catch and run. It's hard to keep all the Tucker Kraft catches and long runs after the catch, separate in your mind because there were so many. But the Steelers are blitzing Deshaun Elliott from 10 yards deep. It's personnel issues because the Steelers don't have the bodies to play. Like, they don't have the players in the secondary to play the amount of man coverage that they want to play. They don't have the team speed to cover the amount of field, either in man or zone, when you're blitzing at such an obscene rate. And the Steelers are blitzing at an obscene rate, unsustainable rate. It's unsustainable. It's just not even an effective way to play defense. They're getting cooked when they blitz. They blitz at an absurd rate against Jordan Love, who's great against the blitz. I have more numbers on that coming. But they're also blitzing Elliott from 10 yards deep and leaving Patrick Queen in man coverage on Tucker Kraft. And he's just getting wildly out leveraged by a simple curl flat concept. Like, it's simple stuff that is confounding this defense. one of the most extreme things that Matt LaFleur did, he turned the dial up to 11 on motion because the Steelers play so much man, but they don't pass things off well in zone or man. So the communication issues that we see with the Steelers, we've been complaining about the Steelers, the scheme issues that we see with the Steelers, we've been complaining about the Steelers. Other coaching staff see it too. And LaFleur's answer for it or way to exploit it, because not an answer, it's a way to exploit it, was to use motion. The Packers used motion, either pre-snap motion or motion at the snap, on 70% of their plays in week 8. By far the highest in the NFL in week 8. The second highest was Houston against San Francisco at 51.3%. Again, the Packers were at 70%. The Texans were the only other team over 45%. Against motion, either pre-snap or at the snap, the Steelers allowed 0.47 EPA per drop back against the Packers, the fourth worst in the NFL. The only teams that were worse are the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Bengals in week 8. Love went 18 for 24 for 228 yards and 2 touchdowns with the pre-snap motion, 9.1 yards after the catch per completion with motion, third worst in the NFL in week 8, which goes to my point of the lack of team speed in the secondary. So you're failing to pass things off. You're getting out leverage, but also when you're in man coverage and they're getting the matchups they want, because sometimes it was to get Tucker Kraft isolated on Chuck Clark. Sometimes it was to get him out leveraging Patrick Queen to the boundary. Like they're manipulating the coverage rules because they're so blatantly obvious and they're playing so much man coverage and don't have the players to hold up in man coverage. So they're getting the ball in space, and the Steelers, they can't tackle either. So that's how you get the 9.1 yards after the catch per completion with that motion. Their yards after the catch per completion was bad in general. It's not necessarily a cause of the motion, but on an example like the quick curl flat to Kraft for the long catch and run, when Kraft's running the flat route, they're blitzing Elliott from like 10 yards deep, which he's never going to get home. Teams are exploiting the Steelers in the quick game so much. What makes you think blitzing a safety from depth is going to do anything? You're just wasting a defender. Elliott should have been the one responsible for Kraft, but because he's coming on the blitz, Patrick Queen can't get outside of the curl route. It kind of works as a pick, and Kraft is off to the races. So it's not just a lack of effort and tackling, which is definitely there. Darius Slay, Juan Thornhill. But it's also scheme issues. It's everything with this defense. It's a disaster. With pre-snap motion in week 8, the Packers generated a 16.7% explosive pass rate, which was the worst in the NFL for the week. Motion at the snap was even worse than pre-snap motion in week 8. With motion at the snap, Love's EPA per dropback was 0.819. That's almost an expected point added every dropback with pre-snap motion. With motion at the snap. My apologies. 13.5 yards per attempt with motion at the snap. He went 9 for 11. So it's not even a small sample size. 9 for 11 for 148 yards with a 27.3% explosive play rate. You think the Steelers have communication issues? You think they have scheme issues? Yeah. It's bad. It's a poorly coached team. One of the most poorly coached defenses in the NFL. Yes, there are personnel issues, but the coaching is inexcusably bad. The communication is inexcusably bad. The effort, inexcusably bad. For the season with motion at the snap, facing the 7th highest rate, the Steelers are facing the 7th highest rate in the NFL. The EPA numbers aren't terrible, 0.388 EPA per dropback with motion at the snap in the last 2 weeks, though. For the season, the numbers aren't terrible. The last 2 weeks, they are. And the last 2 weeks, the Steelers have played good offenses. Not Dylan Gabriel, not Carson Wentz. To make matters worse with these numbers, and I know I'm dumping a lot of numbers, but I like to do that because I think it encapsulates, I spend time digging this stuff up because I think it encapsulates what I'm seeing on the tape, what I'm seeing on the first watch of the game. 45.8% of Love's throws, which you probably saw this just on the game copy, were to receivers with 2 to 5 yards of separation, and 20.8 of his throws were to receivers with 5+ yards of separation. So yeah, he completed 20 passes in a row. He was super accurate, super precise. I think Love is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, I'm really in on Jordan Love. I really was last year as well. I think now that he's healthier than he was last year, his mobility is kicking in a little bit more. So he's scrambling like just enough and creating off schedule just enough, throwing fewer of the fadeaways that can get him into trouble, though there were still some. And he didn't get into trouble because the Steelers secondary is so bad. But when 66% of your throws have at least 2 yards of separation, or to receivers with at least 2 yards of separation, like, a lot of quarterbacks are going to dice up that defense. And what were the Steelers doing blitzing so much? Everyone coming into this matchup, any breakdown you listen to, Steelers can't blitz the Packers. You can't blitz Jordan Love. You're going to be in trouble. You can't blitz him. You cannot blitz Jordan Love. Why? Because he's second in the NFL in EPA per dropback coming in. His numbers got even better. He's still second in EPA per dropback at 0.502 EPA per dropback. A half a point of dropback when he's blitzed. Jared Goff is the only one better. And he has an 11.4, Jordan Love does, 11.4% explosive play rate to a 1.4 interception rate. So you think of him as somebody who's like putting the ball up for grabs every once in a while. Not really. Not against the blitz. It clears up the picture for good quarterbacks when you blitz. They know what you're doing in coverage, and they know where the pressure points are. They can get to their first read so quickly. And any veteran quarterback, it doesn't have to be Joe Flacco at age 41. It can be Jordan Love a few years in, just a really experienced quarterback who knows what he's doing back there and has all the arm talent to make every throw. They're going to get to their quick read. Like, they're going to know their hot routes. They're going to out leverage you. They're going to have the answers because they know you're blitzing single high and man or in cover 3. Either way, they know the answers. In man, one of the answers is just throw at Darius Slay because he cannot cover. He can't be on the field anymore. It's unbelievable how bad he was. Yet, all of that said, the Steelers blitzed on 59.5% of Love's dropbacks. If you don't have like a frame of reference, 30 is a lot. 60% is insane. That's obscene. That's, you're facing Dylan Gabriel and just want to heat him up, think he's too small back there and isn't going to beat you because he doesn't really have the arm. Like, that is disrespectful to blitz a quarterback like Jordan Love that often. It's completely disrespectful. He cooked them. He was pressured 9 times. So on those blitzing dropbacks, he was pressured 9 times. 40% pressure rate with no sacks. 40% pressure rate is pretty good. But when you're blitzing to get that and selling out as much as the Steelers were, you're giving up so much on the back end. And Love's good under pressure. He knows how to manipulate arm angles to throw around defenders. That throw to Tucker Kraft that I've been talking about, that little flat that he ran for 25 yards, dropped his arm angle down to get the throw around TJ Watt. He can throw off his back foot. He can throw fadeaways. Sometimes that's a flaw in his game because he does it a bit too much, but he can do it because his arm strength is ridiculous. Like, he's going to beat you with he has every throw in the bag to beat you. That's why he's so good against the blitz. And LaFleur is always giving him answers. What the Steelers did blitzing was complete malpractice. Love went 16 for 22 for 243 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Steelers are 22nd in EPA per dropback, opposing EPA per dropback when blitzing this year. 8th in DVOA, which is obviously defensive adjusted value over it, so it's defensive adjusted numbers. They're better, but not by a ton, not by a meaningful amount to justify this blitz rate. It's insane. A lot of it's blitzing both linebackers too. It's not stunts, it's not sims, which obviously wouldn't count as blitzes because you're still bringing 4, but that's a great way to create pressure, right? Create chaos for an offensive line, bringing these sim pressures. But it's not these exotics really. A lot of times it's just bringing 2 mics down over the A gap and sending one or both. Because you don't trust your linebackers in coverage. Peyton Wilson was really good in week 8, but Patrick Queen is borderline unplayable, especially in coverage. And you don't have the secondary talent to hold up in coverage. So you're vacating big spaces in the middle of the field by doing that and giving Tucker Kraft two-way option routes with so much space to the middle, one-on-one against Chuck Clark for a dagger touchdown. It's super straightforward blitz packages, often with cover one man behind it. You have to have insanely good man coverage corners to get away with that in the NFL. Insanely good. And they don't. You also don't have the speed in the secondary to tackle in space consistently, which is why those yards after the catch numbers are so big. You're vacating just tons of space and leaving Darius Slay on an island. Leaving Chuck Clark at times on an island against one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Like that touchdown to make it 29-19, where Kraft kind of had the Texas route, sort of. It was an option route. He got inside leverage, and Chuck Clark can't run. Tucker Kraft recorded the fastest GPS miles per hour in the game of any player in the game. He's massive. He can run so fast. And you say, you know, our answer to this on a gotta have it down late in a game that was close, that we were leading at halftime, that's slipping away. Chuck Clark, one-on-one in space. Because we're dying to blitz, baby. We gotta heat him up. It's Greg Williams shit. Like it's idiotic. You do it with no safety help because you want to blitz a quarterback who kills the blitz. It's quick game is still killing the Steelers because of the communication issues on the back end, because of everything I've talked about how they're getting out leveraged scheme wise. And it's especially easy to win in quick game when you're being blitzed because there's no question about the coverage looks or is there going to be a body there in space. Like, no, linebacker vacates, slant right behind him. It's wild. Love went 19 for 22 on throws of under 2.5 seconds for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a 95.6% adjusted completion percentage and a 140.3 rating in quick game. 8.2 yards per attempt despite a 2.7 average depth of target, which goes to the tackling issues, goes to the spaces that they're vacating for run after the catch. It's not just in the pass game because the run fits, especially from the second level, continue to be disastrous. Looking at you, Joey Porter Jr. But it's the schemes to stop good passing offenses are insane, especially considering the personnel. They're insane even if you have Patrick Surtain. Even if you have, I don't know, Derek Stingley, one of these elite Sauce Gardner, elite lockdown cover corners. And they don't. Not close. Not close. And yet they continue to dial up pressure like Dr. Heat. So who's to blame for this defensive disaster? I mean, you can guess who I'm going to point the finger at first. It's the coaching staff. It's the head coach because he runs the defense for all, Terrell Austin, who you can fire him too. But I'm pointing the finger at the head coach. Blitzing at the rate they are with the personnel they have in the secondary is insane. Not to mention how incongruent it is with the build of this team. So you can argue that, okay, they got Slay, they traded Minka for Ramsey because they wanted to be able to play more man coverage, and they thought they could probably do it with Joey Porter Jr., who actually has been good in man coverage. He's been a mess and everything else. So you can say, okay, that's part of the build. But still, at its core, this defense has all of the resources, the second highest paid defensive player in the history of the NFL on average annual value, a first-round draft pick, a veteran who was a first-team All-Pro last year on the interior defensive line, a highly paid edge opposite TJ Watt, Nick Herbig, who's an absolute stud, who's not nearly playing enough, which is another problem with the coaching staff. But all these resources, Keanu Benton, you even hit on Y.A. Black, all these resources up front, and yet you expose the weakest part of your defense. You allocate more resources on the field. If you want to be a blitz-heavy team like this, you need to allocate your resources on the back end. You need to have one of the best secondaries and put all your money and draft picks there. If the Steelers wanted to blitz like this, they shouldn't have drafted Derek Harmon in the first round. He doesn't... You're still bringing pressure anyways. He's not winning enough for you to just run. I like the pick. I'm criticizing the way they're playing. You should have drafted a cover corner because Lord knows you need help back there if you're going to be on an island constantly. Like, I don't know, did Omar Khan say, here you go, I'm giving you these lockdown man coverage corners so you can play the way you want, Mike Tomlin, and get back to blitzing like, not even like Dick LeBeau, because he was a zone blitz guy who did more exotic stuff than this. But so you can play this man coverage, blitz heavy stuff. That's why I got you Ramsey. That's why I got you Slay. Or was it Khan saying, we got to get a little bit better at this? And Tomlin saying, all right, now I can blitz like crazy. Like, I don't know the order of operations there. All I know is it's disastrous. If you're going to spend so much money on the defensive line, then on game day, you allocate your resources to cover up for your weakness. You don't double spend. If you spent the money up front, then you don't blitz, because those players, to give you the surplus value you're expecting on the return of those contracts and draft picks and everything, better be able to win without help. TJ Watt can't. So that's a bad contract. But he's still fine. Like, give him the chance. Nick Herbig can. I'd like to see what Harmon can do as a four-man rush, taking on some more double teams. And Hayward is still winning. He doesn't win quick, but he can still win. And he doesn't have to win so quick if you're dropping 7 in coverage, dropping sometimes 8 in coverage, because you're covering up for your deficiencies on the back end. It's incongruent. Very few teams in the NFL operate in such a way where they invest resources in the offseason and in contracts in one area and then still invest more resources in that area on game day. It just does, because it doesn't make sense. Then you're exposing your weakness double. And this defense shouldn't have so many weaknesses with all the money they're spending on it. But like, yes, the D-line isn't destroying worlds like you'd want it to with all of those resources put into it. But that's because the secondary is so susceptible to the quick game. They got some pressures on Love, but he always had the answer. They got some pressure on Flacco, but his average time to throw was like 2.15. What are you going to do? unless you win immediately. And even then, you may not get there. It's just a time crunch issue. Like, there's just no way. And then giving Nick Herbig just 11 pass rush snaps when he's clearly your best pass rusher. There is no question in my mind after watching TJ Watt and watching Alex Highsmith and even the interior guys, Nick Herbig is your best pass rusher, especially your best speed rusher who has a chance of getting a quick pressure if this is how you're going to play. Giving him just 11 pass rush snaps is malpractice and a huge part of why the pass rush is underperforming. It's honestly unbelievable how poorly coached this team is. The weaknesses that they have in terms of personnel, it's not all on the coaching staff. Like, if Darius Slay was better, this would work better. But he's not, so adjust. That brings me to number 2 on the blame chart. Blame, I don't know how we want to divvy this up. But the second largest slice of that pie chart to me is Darius Slay. Tommy from the Wednesday show, we love Tommy, had this on social media. Slay is on pace to allow 782 passing yards as the nearest coverage defender, 320 yards after the catch, 17 missed tackles, 7 touchdowns with a 135.2 passer rating. He can't tackle and he won't try. You saw on the screen to Malik Heath on the Packers' first touchdown drive, it was just a now screen, basically with no blocker. Like, just one-on-one, Heath and Slay, I dare you to tackle. That's what LaFleur and Jordan Love said on that play. I dare you to tackle one of our most physical receivers. He didn't stand a chance. And then on the Savion Williams touchdown, I pointed this out on the Instant Reaction show. I'm not the only one in Steelers media right now harping on this play specifically, but his effort is abysmal. Just short stepping as Williams is running behind blockers, and Patrick Queen, to his credit, is trying to take on a double team and split it. Slay is unblocked and makes no play at the goal line, just like a little push as Williams runs into the end zone. It's so bad. He's not playing hard. He's not playing well. He's afraid to get hit. He's just too old to play corner. That's okay. Like Shane on the Instant Reaction show said, the Steelers, he feels like the Steelers hit on Joe Hayden late in his career a few years ago, late 2010s. And ever since, they've decided old corners is the way to go. And maybe that's it. Like, it's the only way I can explain it. And again, I go back to the offseason. I understand the theory with that signing because Slay was a player who was cut by the Eagles, so he doesn't count against your comp pick formula. And if what you're doing is trying to protect that comp pick formula so you can get double-digit draft picks in next year's draft, okay, I love that. This is a soft retooling then. So do not spend any resources, especially draft capital, at the trade deadline. Like, in a vacuum, I understand the signing. It hasn't worked, so get him off the field as well. Brandon Echols is not good. He doesn't tackle or fit the run particularly well, especially on the Jacobs touchdown. He got caught way inside. It was just terrible. But he's at least fighting out there. James Pierre's at least fighting when he gets out there. Like, Pierre's bad, but I don't know. I'm ready for bad with some effort. It is so rough on that side of the ball for the Steelers right now. And it's not just Slay, to be clear. Joey Porter Jr. doesn't tackle either. He's a mess doing everything but press man coverage. Communication out of bunch sets, doesn't handle it well. Zone coverage responsibilities, he gets sucked inside way too often. You're supposed to, eyes on the quarterback when you're playing spot drop, but he gets manipulated way too easily. he there was an Emmanuel Wilson run in the second half where the Packers are in 12 and they motion to the strong side to create, an extra gap, two extra gaps in the run fit. And that means it's Porter's responsibility, and he's just gone. He just backpedals. 15-yard run. Like, it's all over the tape. It's horrible. So it's not just Slay, but Slay is the one that, like, at least Porter gives you that man coverage element. Slay isn't giving you anything because he can't cover anymore either. And that's harsh. Yes. He's a great player who's had a great career. Won a Super Bowl last year. Like, that's awesome. It's not Steeler football right now. And it's just done. Sometimes players are just done. And they show you with their effort and their willingness to hit. And it's just done for him. So be done with him. But the Steelers never tend to. They tend to hold on to these guys, these old veterans, way too long. And that's a Mike Tomlin thing. And it's reason number 87 that he should be fired or traded or whatever. But the Steelers should move on. Number 3, I'll go with Patrick Queen. Right? I've talked about the play he gets out leveraged by Kraft ad nauseum. It's not really all on him. Like, he kind of gets picked. And it should have been Elliott's responsibility. It's not Elliott's fault for blitzing. That was the play call. Terrible play call. But he's just such a liability in coverage and so easy to pick on because the Steelers are playing so much man. And that's why teams motion so much to reveal when they're playing man to cause those communication issues and then exploit them. Know where their matchup is with Queen. You can cook him. And it's a big reason that the Steelers blitz with their middle linebackers so much is because they can't really play in coverage. Wilson is getting better at it at least, and Queen is just a lost cause. He only blitzed 3 times in week 8, played coverage on 30 snaps, had a 30 coverage grade by PFF. And say what you will about PFF, they're at least directionally right. You can split hairs over specific ratings, but they're at least directionally right about good or bad performance. Bad. Maybe you think it was a 40. Maybe you think it was a 15. Either way, it's bad. He allowed 5 catches on 6 targets as the nearest defender for 83 yards. Tight ends, kill the Steelers. Running backs out of the backfield, kill the Steelers. They don't have the team speed at the second level to tackle. They don't have the coverage bodies over the middle of the field. The spine of their defense is such a weakness. You can cover for weak corners if you're stout up the spine. You have good linebacker play, good safety play. They don't have either. And I'm encouraged by Wilson, but it's man, that Patrick Queen contract is looking really bad. And it's another Omar Khan decision, which I have liked a lot of the moves Omar Khan has made. This is another decision, really questionable. That contract is not looking good at all. And I'm actually in favor of, I'm not just blanket out on paying linebackers because I think that was like the flip side of the running back conversation where a lot of the thought was you just kind of bargain bin the linebacker position because it can be covered up for in so many ways. I'm actually really in favor of spending in free agency at linebacker because I think it's a position that takes a really long time to figure out. These defenses with the motion and play action or offenses, with motion and play action and like all the Shanahan McVay stuff. A lot of it is designed to exploit linebackers. So I'd rather have somebody with years of experience figuring it out than drafting somebody early. And sometimes the drafted players work out, but you can see people like Levante David hanging on late in his career, even once they lose a step, because they just know what they're doing. And that's really, really valuable. Patrick Queen has been in the league for a really long time. Still doesn't know what he's doing, where he's going. Like, it's just not there for him to lead. He can be the number 2 linebacker, he can be next to Roquan Smith like he was in Baltimore, where Smith handles all the coverage stuff, handles, getting everyone in the right places, and then Queen just flies downhill. Right now, Wilson is kind of the fly downhill guy, and he's doing a really good job of it, but Queen is so exploitable in coverage, and you whiffed on a contract. Okay, it's not disastrous, but these things are starting to pile up where these free agency contracts aren't looking that good, and you're just continue to pour resources into a defense that isn't that good. I put the blame for that on Mike Tomlin, but you can start to see how you can make an argument for it being an Omar Khan issue because there are so many personnel issues on that side of the ball, even with all the resources invested. It's all bad. I would like to see what another coach could do with it, but it's not a good spot either way. And then number 4, and last on my list, safety play minus Deshaun Elliott. Elliott's not always perfect in coverage, and that kind of prayer that Jordan Love threw up was with Elliott in coverage, and Tucker Kraft came down with it. Like, he's going to lose the catch point to Tucker Kraft sometimes, okay? And Kraft, pushed off on that play. I don't know. He's asked to fit the run so much in the box, which is another issue that they need to. They spent so much on this defensive line, and you spent so many draft picks on this defensive line, and yet you need to roll a safety down 60% of the time to fit the run. That's a problem. That's a big problem with this roster and with the execution of this team. But he still manages to cover up for mistakes on the back end. I think he plays really, really hard. That shows up on tape a lot. But with him out, and you can see on the ticker at the bottom, it's a hyperextended knee for Elliott, not like a tear of some kind. So the initial reports that he's out for the season, Tomlin clarified that he's week to week. Now that could be week to week that carries on the rest of the season. You never know, because the Steelers are also bringing Von Bell and Eddie Jackson in for workouts today, bringing or have brought them in for workouts today. So, okay. You got to try something. And neither of those are really answers, full-time answers at this point in their career. But I at least like the idea of maybe you can get somebody who can play a little bit more coverage so you can play more too high, because Elliott can definitely play deep safety and you can play too high with him and Thornhill. They don't choose to do it, but your backup options, Chuck Clark, unplayable in coverage, is exclusively a box safety in my opinion, and even not great at that. Jabril Peppers, box safety, who's best against the run. So maybe you bring in an Eddie Jackson, who's more of a true free safety type, and Von Bell, who's played a lot of free safety, and just stick them back there too high, play a little bit more, cover 2, cover 4. I don't think they're going to do that, but that would be my step in the right direction situation where, okay, let's just put a lid on things. If they're going to nickel and dime us, at least they're not going to get tons of yards after the catch, because we're going to have layers to this defense. We're going to stop blitzing as much as we are. And maybe if the quarterback has to hitch a time or two because things aren't open right away, we can actually get home with this vaunted pass rush. That's the hope. I don't think they're going to do it, but that's the hope. And those players, while flawed, probably give you a better chance of executing that kind of game plan than Jabril Peppers or Chuck Clark. It's all relative. They're not good answers in that area, but better than Clark or Peppers in terms of playing deep safety. But it's the way they play with box safeties and things, the personnel and scheme of this team literally only makes sense if you think Ramsey, Porter, and Slay are all lockdown coverage corners. And they're not. They're not lockdown man coverage corners anymore. They were, in terms of Slay and Ramsey. If you had them on the team 6 years ago, you could play this way and survive. Now you can't. and you're just getting torched all over the place for it. For the most expensive defense in the NFL to have this many holes is wild, but it's because the way they allocate the resources that they do have and the fact that they went bargain bin hunting on the back end and yet play like this defense is built the opposite way. So maybe that's on Khan, maybe it's on the usage. Either way, it's not worth sinking any more resources into. Okay, bring those guys in. Maybe you sign them, but do not trade draft picks to try to fix a problem that you created by trying to protect your comp pick formula and hold on to draft picks. Like that. It would make no sense. Like maybe Reek Woolen is on the trade block in Seattle. Sure, he'd fit this scheme well, but to what end? Like you add another corner who doesn't really fit the run or tackle that well, and you have more of the same issues. If it was just the quick game where they're getting cooked, okay, I could see it because then you can play some more press. You can trust your guys on the outside a little bit more. You can keep blitzing the way you are, but you're still not stopping the run, and that makes it all a moot point. You got to admit defeat on this defense. It's been the most expensive defense in the NFL by a wide margin for multiple years running, and it's gotten good results basically never. Like it was better last year and then completely fell apart in the postseason or anytime they ran up against a good team. That's just what it is, man. It's just a bad defense with a coach who is stuck in the past. The game has passed Mike Tomlin by, and it's time to admit defeat on him and admit defeat on this aging defense. You got to blow it up. If you make any moves at the trade deadline, sell, please. I don't care that the division is kind of fallen into your lap. The Ravens are such a better team. Your schedule gets harder. Theirs gets softer. They played all their brutal games early. You play all yours late. Don't let the schedule trick you into doubling down on a bad team. I wish the Patriots wouldn't have fumbled away that game and would have just beaten the Steelers, and we would have never thought this was a competent team whatsoever. And it would be 3-4 right now. It would be, lockstep with Cincinnati, with Baltimore clearly going to take the division. I wouldn't be scared that this staff is going to delude itself into thinking this is a contender. You just saw what happens when you play a team that belongs in the Super Bowl conversation. You're miles from there. Miles. Sure, it sucks for Aaron Rodgers that his last season's going to end this way. Going to be real tough to make me feel bad for Aaron Rodgers. Dude is doing all right. This team is not an all-in team like we talked about. Like they pushed some chips to the middle of the table, but they still traded George Pickens away. Like they're not all in. They're going to get potentially like 10 to 12 draft picks next year. So go all in on that. Get more. Like, what are you doing with this team? I don't think you could get anything for Slay, but if you could get a 7th, do it. I'd rather have the lottery ticket. It's just, it needs more than a facelift. It needs a reconstruction. And you got to be willing to do it. I don't know that the Steelers will be, but I really hope so. And I especially hope they don't sink any more resources into this team because there's not a simple fix. There's not a fix that trading for a safety, what safety are you even going to get on the market at this point? But trading for a safety, it's not going to fix your Darius Slay problem, your Patrick Queen problem, your issue in run fits. Trading for a Reek Woolen so you can put Slay on the bench. Not going to solve your safety situation. Not going to solve your head coach who's still blitzing like a madman or defensive coordinator, whoever's doing that. It's It's untenable. So don't shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic. Please don't, because that's all you'd be doing. To the Rodgers Report. Man, 46 minutes have absolutely flown by, as Shane says in the chat, and we love hearing from Shane either on the show or in the chat. Blitzing is fun until the other team knows exactly where the gaps will be in the secondary. Exactly. And exactly who to attack when you're playing man. It's all fun and games until you're facing not Dylan Gabriel. So we'll get to the Rodgers Report. I think it's worth talking about his performance. We've only talked about the defense, and I also think that is justified. But, we got to continue to talk about both sides of the ball, even though the defense is going to be the thing that ultimately dooms this team. So I've talked about the play style stuff with Rodgers. In the beginning of the year, he was so quick game reliant, and that's why I said it was unsustainable. Now he started to lean into more of the off-schedule creation stuff. I don't know if it's he's feeling healthier, he knows that they need to kind of have a curveball, or it's because teams like the Packers are playing a lot more closer to the line of scrimmage defensively and giving less of those now screens and things like that where you can get 7 yards after the catch. Like they're adjusting in a way that I fully expected that they would. The Bengals tried to, but it didn't work because they didn't have any pass rush. So Rodgers could just buy time and create off schedule. We saw some of the off schedule stuff from Rodgers this week, but it's just still not, there's not enough there either from the downfield threats, which I don't really think it's that, because I actually like a lot of what Roman Wilson is doing and don't understand why he couldn't get onto the field for so long. But I think it's a quarterback thing. I also don't think it's really an offensive line thing, because the Packers generated a 23.1% pressure rate with a 3.34 second average time to pressure. So it's not like they're just, that was the second longest in the NFL in week 8 for reference. Average time to pressure, second longest in week 8. And yet we saw 3 sacks on Rodgers. We saw him under duress quite a bit. Like, to me, that says the offensive line's blocking it up pretty well. The quarterback's just not getting rid of the ball. And part of that is they played a ton of coverage. Oh my God, who would have ever imagined you can get pressure because you play coverage? You don't just have to blitz like crazy. The Packers blitzed 3 times in this game, and Rodgers did well against it because he's been cooking the blitz most of the year. So to me, it's a kind of a quarterback issue, the issues against pressure, and that the pressure is getting there more than even an offensive line issue. And I've been critical of this offensive line on second watch. Broderick Jones, not as big of a problem as I thought. He got a ton of help from Sayamalu. There were a lot of double teams in pass protection because the Packers really didn't blitz. So a lot of the quick pressures that did happen were Micah Parsons getting one-on-one with Mason McCormick. And like, what are you going to do? What guard in the NFL is going to stonewall Micah Parsons in that situation? So yeah, it's maybe not that the Steelers don't trust the blocking on late downs, that a lot of those throws are short to the sticks. Maybe it's a lack of pop in the receiving core, but I liked Roman Wilson at wide receiver too. The reps he got, it was his career day for sure. A lot of that came in garbage time, but he was open throughout the game when he was out there. He's just a ball player, man. Like, not to take a tangent on Roman Wilson, but like I said, I can't really figure out why it took so long to get him on the field. He looks like he did at Michigan. Like, he blocks hard in the run game. He's not the biggest guy, but he gives a lot of effort in the run game. He has awesome instincts to get open downfield, especially on scramble drill stuff and against zone. Like, I just think he has really good feel, which I'm sure Rodgers loves. So I think that's why we're seeing him more and more. And we saw the way he was able to break downfield when Rodgers broke contain for that explosive play in the first quarter. Like that, he was doing that stuff. That's all over his film, and Rodgers just kind of needs to look his way a little bit more. But I like him as wide receiver 2. Like I wouldn't trade for a wide receiver 2. For one, because I think this team's a lost cause and you shouldn't invest any more resources in it. But for 2, because I like Roman Wilson. I want to see him develop. So like there were other issues, but we can't absolve Rodgers of his sins, right? His negative 2.1 air yards to the sticks, something I've harped on a lot, like especially on late downs. The Steelers went 1 for 10 on third down. He throws it short of the sticks, and that's a I don't want to get hit thing, but it's just conceding. Like it's Kirk Cousins stuff. And you never really would expect that from Rodgers, but it's been a theme all year, and that's just he's getting old, doesn't want to take the hits. And sometimes he even was still taking the hits, but wasn't able to push the ball downfield, especially on those late downs. On his pressure dropbacks, he was 3 for 10, 476 yards and a touchdown. So he did hit a couple explosives, but he wasn't consistent and got sacked on 3 of his 13 pressure dropbacks. And on those pressure dropbacks, had a 4.05 second time to throw. Sacks are a quarterback stat, and that was definitely true in this game. The out of structure plays continue to rise, and as defenses play more press man and have more bodies around the line of scrimmage to take away the quick game, which I think is how you beat the Steelers, the out of structure stuff was introducing more explosives, but it's also introducing more negative plays. And this offense is not built to survive negative plays. It's not built to be behind the sticks because you don't have a lot of reliable threats at wide receiver. Even if I like Roman Wilson, you still just don't have options to push the ball downfield. You don't still trust your offensive line to hold up for long dropbacks. And I think that's a concern as well. You'd want to be a jumbo personnel run the ball team. Okay, yes, that's good. I like a lot of what they've done with that. And maybe we'll still be able to do it because they got some good injury news on Sayamalu. He's just going to be day-to-day, and he's questionable for week 9 with that pec injury. So that's great news because it gives you Spencer Anderson in those jumbo sets. So I like that that offensive philosophy, but you cannot end up behind the sticks then, either by penalties or by taking sacks. And as Rodgers has started to play more and more like old Rodgers in terms of vintage Rodgers, he is old Rodgers now, but he's playing like vintage Rodgers in terms of play style. That can work against the Bengals defense, but not really the Packers because they have the bodies to get home. And they did. The Packers did not blitz him, as I said. He's played well against the blitz, so that was smart not to blitz him. Take notes on that, Mike Tomlin. Only blitzed 3 times on his 39 dropbacks, and he went 3 for 3 for 20 yards and a touchdown. You clear up the picture when you blitz. You got to do more than just bring extra bodies. And the Steelers defensively have not done a good job of that, but they've made teams pay when they have. The other thing that I think is actually kind of alarming, like the offense was not the biggest problem, but it did continue to stall out and was more explosive play reliant than down efficient, especially in the passing game. The run game still like a lot. Don't really have any issues with it. They need to get Jalen Warren more touches. But the Packers did a really good job taking away play action. Like the Steelers have accessed some of the explosives on these bootlegs, on these long developing play actions. A lot of times out of jumbo personnel so they can keep extra blockers in. The Packers just held up really well against it defensively, and that's a good defense. But the concerning thing to me is they forced Rodgers to have a negative 0.8 average depth of target on play action dropbacks. That's a problem. That's what we saw early in the season when it was play action to screens, play action to like throwaways, and there was just nothing there. As the Steelers run the ball better, they've been able to access those explosives. The Packers kind of counterpunched and took that away. So if you're getting pressured on those, you're checking the ball down and not going to be able to access explosives that way, then the only way really to do it, especially against a team that's playing so much coverage and not giving you one-on-ones, because Rodgers loved to see a one-on-one to DK and throw a deep shot. Really wasn't any of that in this one. Then you're really reliant on, like, it makes it a quarterback game. It makes it okay, keep plays alive, wait till this breaks down on the back end. You got to stay up, you got to buy time, and then you got to hit explosives. Because they're taking away the quick game and dropping bodies in coverage. So you got to be able to buy time, and you got to be able to scramble against that, and the Steelers really can't. So your options are to run them out of it and make them rotate a safety down so you can get one-on-ones. Steelers were doing that in the first half, and they kind of just stopped after halftime. And then the game script dictated that they couldn't do it. So either you got to run them out of it, or you got to have a quarterback who can buy time and access that stuff, or an offensive line that can block it up for a long time for longer developing deep routes. I don't know that they have either. So again, while the offense is not the big problem, I still think they have answers on that side of the ball. It's far from perfect, and Rodgers was far from perfect in this one. He definitely got outplayed by Jordan Love. It was his worst game in a couple of weeks. It was not bad. Like, it is not, he is playing well enough for this team to be winning, especially the way their roster is built, with an offense that wants to play from in front and a defense that theoretically should create takeaways and short fields and things of that nature. But they're not getting any splash plays on defense. So the complementary aspect of it is just kind of completely gone. So you end up into situations where you're getting blown off the field in the second half. It all comes back to the defense. It all comes back to the coaching staff. And it all comes back to me being done with this iteration of the Steelers. And it's felt like multiple years in a row of just the same thing. Now they have better quarterback play. They have more answers on offense. They have the best run game they've had in years. And it's still not going to matter. So just don't compound your problems. Don't spend any resources at the trade deadline. Look to trade some of your aging guys on defense, please. See if you can get any draft capital. And look to the future. Because this season, this team is not capable of winning a playoff game. It's maybe capable of making the playoffs in a pretty questionable AFC, but not much more than that. So, as Mr. Tell Me points out in the chat, and I appreciate the interaction there, average points against 2023, 18.8, 2024, 20.4, and so far in 2025, 25. The defense is trending in the wrong direction. This is not a one-game, one-season problem. I agree. That's why I want to move on from the head coach. But I think those numbers illustrate it really well. Like, as they continue to pour more resources in this defense, it continues to fall apart more and more. And it's because offenses are figuring out how to beat it schematically, and you're getting older. And you dumped a bunch of resources into aging corners that can't play man coverage and then dared them to play a ton of man coverage. Like, it's just all really incongruent. And that's frustrating to see from a franchise that is supposedly one of the most well-run franchises in the NFL. That was ugly, in my opinion. It's going to get worse with the Colts. That offense is ridiculous. Shane Steichen has historically killed the Steelers. And with Daniel Jones playing the way he is, I don't see them, and Jonathan Taylor running the ball the way he is, that's the best offense in the NFL right now. I think the Steelers lose, and lose ugly. And then we can start to have real conversations about, okay, what are we selling off at the deadline? Because this is a lost cause. I hope so, because that's the reality of this team. It's just not a good team. So thanks for listening to my ranting and raving for the second time this week. Thanks for hopping on a Tuesday. I know I'm typically Mondays. Brian Kelly got fired. College football has been insane this season, so my writing responsibilities have been even more insane. You can check out a lot of my writing on various FanSided sites. You can also find a lot of my work that I post to Blue Sky at Yourish 3. So some interaction or anything follows there on Blue Sky, greatly appreciated. Love to interact with anyone who's a listener. And then obviously you can follow this podcast, which has an episode tomorrow, also has a special episode with a special guest on Thursday with Tommy and Shane. So we're giving you tons of content this week. Make sure you are subscribed to the Still Curtain podcast, and like and share and comment and post to social media and tell your friends, because I think we got a lot of fun stuff cooking on the page this season. It's been a really fun year, and it'll continue to be a fun year going forward. That's it for me today. Until next time, have a good one. And as always, go Steelers.